I'll start the recording. There we go.
Hi, Neil. Oh, I should turn that off.
Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a few minutes.
So we're live streaming and we're recording, so we can get started anytime.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Olivier, and welcome to today's Lama Yeshe Ling conversation. Today, we're delighted to be joined by author, poet, translator, practitioner, and longtime friend of the community, Annie Bien. Annie's newest book, The Magical Adventures of the Dalai Lama, His Life and Love, is a vivid and playful journey into the world of Sangyen Gyatso, a figure who has fascinated Tibetologists, poets, and dreamers for centuries. We'll be talking with Annie about her making of this book, her creative process, her connection with Buddhism, and her history with teachers like Robert Thurman, His Holiness the 14th, her relationship with the Lama Yeshe Ling community, and her life as a poet, Qigong practitioner, and Lojong teacher. Annie, welcome and thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Ryan, and everyone for coming, and Lama Yeshe Ling, Manoshi, and Dave. I feel really honored to be here to be able to talk about this book about the sixth Dalai Lama, because I think not too many people know about him.
We're very thankful that you're here and very excited. Before we get started, I'll share my screen for a moment and we'll do a quick refuge in bodhicitta. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings.
I'd also like to say it in Tibetan. So,
Please, go ahead.
Sangye chodang tsuki chunam la, changchu pardu dani gyapsu chi, dagi jinsu ki pi sonam ki, dola pinche sangye drupada shu. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. For those who haven't met you, Annie, before, how do you like to introduce yourself? Poet, author, Buddhist practitioner, or accidental time traveler visiting the sixth Dalai Lama's world?
Well, I tend to introduce myself as a writer and translator, but when I'm teaching Qigong, I'll say I'm a Qigong teacher. And I try to be adaptable to my environment. So I don't actually really talk about being a Dharma practitioner too much. Um,
Okay.
because I think it's because of my teacher, Chulnarato Rinpoche, saying to me, you don't have to tell anything about yourself. Let them find out who you are. And just be the good Buddhist you are in your heart and see what happens.
Lovely. That's great advice. Annie, you've stepped into such a colorful moment in Tibetan history with this book. What first sparked your curiosity and imagination for this project?
Oh, it wasn't me, actually. I met Robert Thurman. He was my Tibetan Buddhist text translation teacher at Columbia University. And I was actually studying with another Lama, and his name was Geshe Losang Jamspal. He taught a beginning and intermediate Tibetan Buddhist text class. And then at the end of the first year, he said, "You should go into Robert Thurman's class." And I said, "No, I'm not qualified. I just started, and I'm not actually enrolled in Columbia because you just invited me. So I'm just an auditor, and I'm not even that because I'm not enrolled at Columbia University." And he said, "Okay, so you'll go there on Tuesday and Thursdays, and from 10 to 11:30, and you will be there, and I'll see you." And that's how I went to Robert Thurman's class. And the first time I went into Bob Thurman's class, he was uncharacteristically early to class, so he was sitting there, and I walked in, and he looked up and he went, "Who are you?" And I got really scared and I said, oh, and he said, oh, wait, you probably were sent by Paul, right? And I said, yes. Okay, sit down. And that was how I got in there. And it was kind of interesting because it was the graduate PhD students' dissertation theses. And so the first guy who was doing his thesis is this Chinese man who was very fast reader of Tibetan, and he was doing Gyalchap Day's commentary on Uttara Tantra, and I couldn't even keep up with him reading the first page. I saw him flip, and I thought, "Oh my God, why is he flipping? He's already done." And so I wrote an email to Bob and said, "I'm really sorry. I think this is too advanced for me, and if it's okay, though, I'd like to just sit and listen." So the next class I went back and it was really, really hard. And he had gotten my email and he said, "So Annie, what's the problem? Why can't you take the class? I never said you couldn't take the class. What don't you know?" And I said, "Well, I don't even know where to start with this commentary." He said, "Okay, so let's do this because you're in the class." And I said, he says, "Don't, I'm just." So he took apart, well, Tibetan sentences are extremely long for those who know Tibetan, and and sometimes Tsongkhapa and Gyaltsab Je they would have 5-line sentences in Tibetan. So he said the big hint is to look for the verb. It's usually at the end of the sentence and at the end of each phrase. And so he taught me all this stuff. He said, let's just do this one short sentence. If you can understand this one sentence, how it's broken down, study it 5 times, 9 times on your train ride home to Brooklyn, then when you come back to class, you'll know that little bit more. And it was right. And he had me read with him. He said, my teacher, Geshe Wangyal, always said, read aloud and then learn what it sounds like. And so he would read and I would read with him. And at the end of that class, it was incredibly helpful. And the next day, at the end of class, someone said to me, "So, what year are you a grad student?" I said, "Well, actually, I'm not a grad student. I'm just an auditor." And he went, and this one person said, "Oh, well, could you ask Bob this question about how a sentence is broken down?" So I soon became class friends with all the classmates because they didn't want to admit they didn't know how to break down the sentence. So I could just ask all these questions, and it was very helpful for me. I learned a lot. And that's how I met him. And then I brought him a piece of writing I did that was published on this little BBC writers group, like class, learning how to write class. And I wrote a nonfiction piece about having tea with the Dalai Lama's secretary. And they had published it. So I showed it to him, and he said, "Oh, so you're a writer. What else do you do?" And I said, "I write poetry." And I showed him, and he said, "Oh, so I am working on this book project. I want to write about the sixth Dalai Lama as a piece of historical fiction. So, oh, do you want to work with me? Because I don't write fiction." And of course, I leapt at that opportunity, and I said, "Yes, I would. I would really like to be part of that." And then the first thing we did was he took there are 3 levels of biography and traditional Tibetan biographical tradition for the high lamas, and they're actually called liberation stories of liberation. They're liberation to enlightenment. It's not a biography, but the first level is the external biography, which sounds and looks like the ones that we read about people. The second level is about their meditation and practice techniques, and they usually write manuscripts of how to practice Buddhism in that second level. And the third level is the secret level, which is all of their tantric practices. So Bob said, well, we're going to write about all the magical stuff. So this is going to be a secret level biography, and it's fictional. So we can do whatever we want to between this translation of what happened here and there. One of the big things is he took his ordination, he became a monk. And then a few years later, they will say he wanted to kill himself and he gave up his vows. But they don't write about what happened to cause all of that. And so he would say, we should fill in the blanks on this part. And that's how the story began as it was a historical based on all the facts from the first level biography, but we were wondering like, why did he say this to a certain person? What happened before that happened? And why did he have a conflict with the regent who was his guide, and then suddenly he didn't trust him anymore? Why did he give up his vows? And that's how it all evolved. Yeah, and
Very interesting.
we made up fictional characters too, because Bob rightly said that what happens is you get all the highlights of what all the historical people were like. So they were usually always the famous people. But if he was so great and so compassionate and everything, he must have been really nice to the little guy, the one they never write about. So I want you to write about them too. So, and then he'd give me a lot of leeway about certain scenes and things that we could do, so that people could have a sense of rapport with him. And the other thing I based my writing on was on what it's like to meet with the Dalai Lama and that kind of whole atmosphere that as a regular, ordinary human being you might have, but who believes in this person from the very beginning because of their presence, what that feels like. That's what I tried to write about as well, because it's not just like in the photographs where he's shaking hands with the current Dalai Lama shaking hands with people. They all look really happy, but what happened to make them look like that?
Fascinating. The sixth Dalai Lama stands out in history amongst others. How is he different in your eyes?
Well, he's different because he was the only Dalai Lama to give up his monk's vows. He became a layperson. He fell in love with women and he wrote love poetry about his experiences with women, and then falling in love, being jilted, being infatuated. He also wrote about, which I find also very interesting, is he makes commentary about people around him and how they uh, they judged his behavior, all in poetry, four-line poems, 6 syllables. Very, very accessible writing that he wrote. And I think that's what made him stand out was he wrote these love poems and he never wrote a commentary about practice. So that's what made him different. And he didn't live very long. He wasn't recognized until he was 14 because the fifth Dalai Lama was dying and told his regent, I'm building the Potala Palace in Lhasa, and it's going to be the power source for Tibetan Buddhism. So you must keep my death hidden until the Potala is finished. So there's not any conflict about its being there or the people who are going to be in it. And so the regent said, okay. And it took almost 15 years for it to be finished. So they didn't recognize him until he was 14, which is really shocking because usually, as we know, reincarnations are recognized as little kids. And so he had a whole time to become a teenager, and he was treated very poorly because they didn't want to. The regent didn't want to let anyone know who he really was, so it was hidden. And they claimed that he was a reincarnation of an abbot at some monastery in Tawang in the Himalayas, tiny town on the area around close to the Indian border, and is now disputed territory between China and India. But they nobody knew who he really was because it was dangerous. So he was attributed as being an abbot, a reincarnation of an abbot. So at their local monastery in Tawang Monastery. And so people treated him really badly, and his parents, and he was kept in a practically like prison in captivity. And he was sick all the time as a little kid. And people, because they thought he was a minor tulku, minor reincarnation, they didn't have any problem with treating him badly or his parents until he was officially recognized after the Patala Palace was done. And then he was brought to Lhasa to be enthroned. So that part really interested me because I thought as a 14-year-old, that's the age when you're questioning anything, everything anyway, and you're rebelling. So what was it like for him to go from some kid that nobody cared about to being the Dalai Lama? And how is behavior around him suddenly different with all these different um, people who are helping him and all these minders and tutors and expectations from being no one to suddenly being glorified? That it must have done something that maybe a little kid wouldn't experience so much as a teenager would. And I think a lot of his poetry reflects his recognition of hypocrisy, which is a big theme in his life.
I understand there is a fair bit of source material that you were able to leverage for the book, but then you also needed to take quite a bit of creative licensing to fill in some gaps. So can you talk a bit about what that was like?
Well, when I got the assignment from Bob, we did the translation, and then he said, "Okay, now here are like 6 or 8 books you should read right away." And you know how academic books are not, well, they're kind of like this book. They're really thick. And he said, "Read all of these." And a lot of them were by Westerners who had gone, 2 Italian men and an English person, like different people who went uh, to India, to Tibet at that time in Lhasa, their accounts of what life was like, meeting the Dalai Lama at that time. And it's really, really interesting because one of them was a Jesuit priest who was trying to convert him into becoming Christian. But he got so interested in their discussions and in debates that he nearly converted. So it was kind of an interesting thing. And then there were also known to be Indians who went over there because of Tibetan Buddhism coming from India. And so there's one character in the book who represents a magician who sort of brings the magic quality that the Tibetans adopt in their Buddhist practice in Tantra. So there were a lot of sources that I had to read, and at one point it felt pretty overwhelming. They also had Bob also gave me a book translated into English about Desi Sangye Gyatso's own writings, who was his regent. And he was a regent who knew so much, and he wrote books on medicine. He's the source of the Tibetan Buddhist medicine um, sciences because he developed a lot of that. So it was a really interesting time to read very I'm trying to think. There were also a few Tibetan translators of his poems who wrote little bios in front of the poetry that I thought were very helpful, setting the stage of what it was like in Tibet at the time, because there was a lot of influence from Mongolia had sort of taken over Tibet for that time. And so there was association secularly with the Mongolian Khans and also China. The Emperor Kangxi, who was a Qing dynasty emperor, and sort of the interplay of power struggle between Tibet, China, and Mongolia, although at that time, the Chinese and the Mongolians were Tibetan Buddhist. So the Tibetans held a lot of power as far as the religious practice went. And then the secular practice, because of the previous fifth Dalai Lama building the Patala Palace, he was the first Dalai Lama who was both the secular and religious leader of Tibet. So that was a new thing before the Tibetan Buddhists went to China the Sakya lineage went to China, but they didn't take the power, the political power also. So that was the beginning. The fifth Dalai Lama did that. And the sixth gave it all up. He gave up his vows. And that was one of the more interesting things to try and figure out why he was so drastic about doing that. And it for when I was reading, there's also a book by Thomas Laird about the Tibet story where he interviews the current Dalai Lama about the history and also about this Dalai Lama. And His Holiness was saying he felt like um, it was a very difficult time, and a lot of people kind of denigrate this Dalai Lama because he gave up his vows and became a lay person. But the current Dalai Lama has a theory that Bob wanted to work with, is that he decided it might be better to be a lay person and be with the people to see if he could make people understand Tibetan Buddhism better that way. And also because he had fallen in love, he wanted to be a lay person because he actually didn't want to break his vows because he'd fallen in love. And so in that way, I felt that was for me, that worked as a writer for me to read the Dalai Lama say this, because when I talked about him with other Western scholars, and I guess some Tibetan scholars too, they all talked about how he was the sixth Dalai Lama was the naughty boy, the lover boy, the troublesome one because he gave up his vows. And a lot of times when they read his poetry, they'd also say, well, that they're not Dharma poems, they're just love stories. And then some people tried to say, well, he actually taught on a third level. Everything is tantric, everything that he did. And I think, yes, that's a possibility, but when you read his poems on just a very everyday level, the language is so direct. He uses easy words to understand, and he goes through emotions that we all go through. That's what convinced me I really wanted to write about this Dalai Lama because he was really accessible and he didn't have any big words. And yet especially when he fell in love, the emotions he went through, they're so human that, and then I also read he sang all of these poems that he composed. So that makes him different too. He was kind of like Milarepa without the having the Dharma message a lot of times, or a very direct Dharma message. It was a lot of times I felt like it's just tapping into how you feel as a human being. And maybe this is why you need to practice because you have these feelings. So that's what made me really like him.
Well, that's
And
awesome. Thank you.
yeah.
I understand this book was a long time in the making. It started quite a long time ago, and there's some twists and turns. What was that like, and how does it feel to actually be published now?
Well, it does feel great because it took 18 years. It's good vote. But it started out that we did a draft and finished it in 2008, first draft. And then all sorts of things happened. Bob got really busy. There were all sorts of projects happening and other things. And it turned out that he ended up shelving it. And I'd write him occasionally about it because I wanted to do another draft or see if we could get it published because he was so eager to get it published right away. But nothing, nothing, nothing. So I gave up. I thought it would never be published. And then during the pandemic in 2020, he wrote me an email and said, I reread the book and I think it needs to be published. I think it's a good book. And you did a great job writing. And then something that happened that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Originally, I was going to be his ghost writer and have a little acknowledgement inside the title page that I also wrote it. But after that, he said, I want to give you full credit for your writing. So we're going to be co-authors, and you will be listed alphabetically. So you'll go first. So that was an incredible thing to have happen. I was so happy, and I thought, ooh, that 18 years was worth the wait.
Awesome, thank you. We spoke a little bit before the interview how Dharma practices can be tools that one can pick up. What tools do you think we can learn from the sixth Dalai Lama in your book?
Um, I think for me, a lot of times what I learned was how do you practice when you're put into a situation that's really difficult that you think you can't solve? And he was faced with that all the time. And yet he managed to survive and be listened to for quite a long time before he completely and totally rebelled. And even though he ended up disrobing, he did it, to me, I think he disrobed because he fell in love and he broke his vows. So in that way, he was a really honorable and a dedicated practitioner because he was a monk and he couldn't be anymore. He didn't want to be. And then he added on the part that he had fallen in love. So that would make you think, well, then you really can't go back to, because he saw that the his regent, Desi Sangye Gyatso, was also known to was a monk. He kept his monk's robes when he needed them, and then when he didn't, as a lay person, because he was regent and did political things, he had lovers. He had two known wives, and and I think as a young Dalai Lama, he probably thought, how come he can do that and it's okay? Uh, why should we be so hypocritical? And I think one of the big things for me when I was writing was he saw so much hypocrisy in how people practice. They'll say one thing and they'll do something completely the other, and then when it's convenient, they'll be very hallowed again. And I think that we've also, as practitioners, experienced that, where we might meet someone we think is one way, and their talk is really strong, and then maybe you'll see them. It could be something as little as going to a restaurant together and having the person you really admire just totally dismissive and ignore the waiter or waitress. It's like that, or not liking something and complaining about it. I mean, that to me, that's not really Dharma practice then. Not finding a, a, a polite and compassionate way to deal with your difficulties with other people. That's what I've learned from this book. It's kind of interesting in writing. Like a lot of times I would think, how would he work this situation out? How would he do something to make someone see their own point of view in a different way? And that was a lot of that was partly because I did many prayers to him directly for help. And I had two visions, which were very, very helpful. Where I really felt like he helped me was before the first, Bob asked me to write the first teaching because it's easy. The first teaching is going to be easy. So he's going to teach to a huge group of Tibetans and you write it. And I said, no, no, wait. You're the scholar. And he said, yeah, but since you think you don't know much, you're perfect for it. And if it's really inaccurate, I can fill in stuff. So I thought, okay, I'll write how I feel if when someone says that to me. If he's like 15, maybe he feels nervous like this. And so at the end of that, I gave it to him and Bob said, I'm not gonna touch it. It's good. And then they gave me a lot of confidence, but that's because that night before I wrote it, I had a dream that I walked into a cave and it was all lit up and the sixth Dalai Lama was sitting there. His hair was long, he's wearing blue robes, and I thought, and I was just going to go and talk to him, and he opened his mouth and I woke up. But somehow that helped me. And then the second time was when Bob said, now you're going to write the trip to China where he's arrested and he's going to be taken to China. And that's when it's historically it said that he died. So you write that. And I thought, wait, and again, wait a second. How am I going to write that? And he said, oh, I'm sure you'll do. You're doing good. Just go ahead. I'll just read it later on. So then that night, once again, I decided I should pray to him. And that night I had this, I think it was early morning. I had an incredible dream where I was submerged in water. It was blue all around me. And the sixth Dalai Lama was opposite me, and his hair was just long and flowing outwards. And he came up and he put his hands on my face. And then I wrote the scene. It was effortless. So I really felt like he helped me out. And
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
oh, you're welcome.
So I'm curious if you could go back to that cave but had the opportunity to speak, what might you ask?
What would I ask? I think I would ask him, how are you doing now that I've written this about you? Are you okay with it?
Looking for a stamp of approval?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there something I should be writing like in a sequel?
Yeah, maybe we'll look for the sequel. I'm curious about researching the figures from the book. Were there any other characters that surprised you and stood out?
Um, it was interesting because Bob decided that all of the women were fictional, except for Tsering Tashi, who was the Khan, Hassan Khan's wife. Both of those were historical characters, and it was known that she'd fallen in love with him. So I think writing about from the women's point of view was really interesting for me because I was so concentrated on him, and all of a sudden I had to figure out what is it that they see? What is it that's attracting them to him that he may not notice, or maybe, but because he's like Dalai Lama, he probably does know all of these things. And how do you work with that? I kind of forgot your question again. What was
Yeah,
it?
it was what if any of the other characters peripheral to the sixth stood out as interesting or anything
Oh,
came up
yeah.
during your research?
Oh, yes, the regent was really interesting to me because he was sort of like the puppet master and he arranged everything. And and when I found out that he was really a hypocrite and a lot of things, at first I really admired him. And the more I read about him, I thought, well, he's a pretty devious person, but how do you work with this, who's this great scholar? How does he rationalize everything he does? And make you believe it and still remain charming and then do like all these backhanded things. It kind of think made me think of people you read in history who do stuff like that, and how do you work with keeping him likable and not having him just be a villain? And then the scene where I wrote where he kills, or he's killed, it really made me upset because of that. And also, um, the scenes where the last scenes with Hassan Khan, I think it was all with the historical people that I became very much part of the relationships he had with these people that existed in his life, that how he may have transformed them or not. Especially when you read in the history, they said he has friends, young boy friends who are, like because he's too isolated, it suggested he should hang out with some young guys and then they become really good friends and he starts being an archer and ignoring his duties. And but what are these guys actually really like if they're not monks? They're all like lay people having fun. Uh, and what is it that makes him like them even? And that I thought that was, it's always really interesting to figure out somewhere along the way when I'm writing, the characters themselves just take over. And it's not me being the puppet master. They're just they're just yapping away a lot of times or doing things. And I think, okay, I guess that's what's going on. It's like him and Plasan Khan, they have a very close relationship because the sixth Dalai Lama really admired him as a kid. They were friends. They really cared about each other. And then they come in conflict because Plasan Khan becomes the king of Tibet and he just wants to get rid of this person that he really loved for a while. How do you deal with that too? That I thought that was an interesting dilemma because you see it all the time in the news, what's happening to people.
Mhm.
What might they actually be thinking behind their little veil of who they are?
Interesting. Thank you. Anyone who follows you on social media will see that you play an active role in your local community, in particular with your ongoing classes of Qigong and Lojong. It's easy to see you're very passionate about these practices. For those who may not know what Qigong and Lojong are, how did you decide? Well, can you say a bit about these practices and what made you decide to package them together?
Oh, that was kind of a scary idea. At Tibet House, their managing director said, "Why don't you teach, a qigong class, but make it different from regular qigong classes, so people will want to come to it." And I thought, "Oh, well, qigong is Chinese, and this is Tibet House, so I should put something Tibetan in there." So I thought qigong is a physical meditation form, restorative um, meditation form for Kung Fu martial artists from the teacher I learned from. And so he always talks about all your Qigong practice is a meditation and it should come from your own mind. He told me later on. He was like ruthless with me when I was learning. Nah, it's not good enough. Yeah, just got to do it again. Yeah, you're not from your heart. What are you doing? This kind of thing. And then, so that was I'd never met someone like that. And then I thought, how do I bring that into the Tibetan Buddhist world? And I thought, physical training of the mind and mind training of the mind are the two main things that I do right now. So I'll see what it's like if I can teach a Qigong class with physical meditation to relax the body so you're not so distracted by your daily thoughts because you have to learn something, my goodness, and pay attention and not think about what's bothering you and figure out how to do this in 4 counts. Maybe that would be helpful. And then move on to sitting people down and doing lojong and mind training for when you're having trouble with your relationships. How do you work with your mind mentally using what you have learned about relaxing your mind physically? And I think that's what made it happen. In the first class, I thought, oh gosh, I don't think it worked. I think everyone was totally lost. 45 minutes of each. And then the managing director said, "Hey, that worked really well." I thought, "Oh, really? Yeah, yeah. Why don't you do this like twice a month?" And I thought, "Oh, okay." That's how it happened. So,
That's amazing. Yeah, I personally am quite envious of, where you are and the amount of resources you have, such as Tibet House. I imagine being involved in that community, you must get to meet a great many interesting people. Have there been any particular people stand out that you've been able to work with and learn from there?
um, recently, actually, I really like it when the Tibetans come through, and I've learned a lot from Bob Thurman. He doesn't come around that much anymore. But Serkong Rinpoche, Central Serkong Rinpoche came, and I met him actually at Shantideva Center. But he was, we kind of, we just became friends very easily by a question that I had asked, and we're still in touch. And he has been great at giving advice if I feel like I'm sort of stuck somewhere. And it was last Monday, Jado Rinpoche came and gave a whole teaching on Kala Chakra, which was just amazing. And for me, actually, because it's called Tibet House, the Tibetan things I like because that's what I'm there for, I think. And I think that that's why I like teaching uh, Tibetan Buddhism there, which was not something I did initially because hired me to just teach lunchtime meditation for 45 minutes to calm people down so they can go back to work. And I was doing that anyway at Shantideva Center, and I went over there and I taught it for 45 minutes. And I think it was Buddha's birthday. I said to my class, it's Buddha's birthday. I thought I'd teach you the Four Noble Truths because, we've got to honor him in some way. And after I finished that class, my class asked me, would you teach a Dharma class? And so that's how I got started. And they asked me to teach Santideva. Oh, yes. And Chris says that Tibet House events are simulcast, so you can always tune in on them that way. But
Okay.
yeah, I really do sort of, I feel like it's because it's Tibetan culture, I tend to gravitate towards the Tibetan things there.
That's lovely. I understand you had a few opportunities to attend teachings or talks with His Holiness the 14th as well. What was that like?
It was great, actually. First time I went to a teaching of his was in Roseland, New York City in 1999, I think or eight, and he was teaching with a Chinese master. And the moment he came in, I started crying. It was a big group teaching, and I was at that point, I had taken some meditation classes at Shambhala Center, and I said to them, I'd like to go to the Dalai Lama. And they said to me, you should be careful of spiritual like trying to find, like you're going to a supermarket to find the spiritual teacher. You should be more concentrated. And I said, yeah, I think that's the one then. You know, if I'm going to shop around, I'm going to go to the Dalai Lama. And he changed everything for me. So then in 2000, there was an event for International Campaign for Tibet. They asked people they were going to choose three people to ask a question of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And my question was chosen among two others, and I got to ask it first. So I was extremely nervous. And my question that I asked him was, because it was more secular meeting, it was not because it was for the preserving Tibet. I said, I am born in Hong Kong, raised in the United States, and my whole life have not felt Chinese or American at the right time. I'm always too Chinese or I'm too American, depending on who I'm with. And so I've been studying Tibetan Buddhism and I really believe in it, but how can I be a compassionate, truly compassionate person if I hate being Chinese? I just hate it, I said to him. And then uh, he said, well, he took a moment to answer and he talked to Jinpa for a little bit. And then he said, well, I really appreciate your sentiment, but you must realize that um, if you really understand compassion, then you will know that it's a universal emotion and that your ethnicity is like a flavor. So why don't you learn as much as you can about your own culture and as much as you can about Tibetan culture and start talking to your friends and relatives about the benefits of each and slowly, slowly increase that and learn about talk about American culture because it's your small individual steps, like Mahatma Gandhi said, that can change mankind. And besides, how can the Tibetans ever go back to China, to Tibet, if they're not friends with the Chinese? So you have a task now. And I thought, whoa,
Mm.
I was so overwhelmed, but it changed my life because I left that audience just so full of thinking, wow, I had no idea I have a potential. I'd never thought of it that way. I was just like down on being not one, not other. And he was saying, no, no, use both. And ever since then, I'll never forget that. And I've met him in small group audiences with Tibet House and with the Tibet Center. my Dharma teacher for a long time, Chungla Rinpoche, who was his debating partner. His Holiness is debating partner in Lhasa. So I've been really lucky. I've been able to meet him a few times, sometimes just to shake hands. But one time I was at a conference and I said, I'm in charge right now of the administrative stuff in this conference, and everyone seems really happy. But how do we take this happiness out productively after we leave the conference? I think everyone's going to just go back to their own habits. And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, well, I don't know anything about foundation building, but just don't be hypocritical. That's all he said. And it felt like this wave went through the crowd, like, woo. Because, when you're at conferences, people are competing and, trying to compare each other and trying to one up each other. And the crowd was silent. And I remember thinking, that's so true. Don't be hypocritical. I think about that a lot. And that also informed the writing of this book, too, because I felt like Tanyang Gyatso really recognized that. And so when the end of the conference was that day, and I remember Bob Thurman was one of the co-hosts, and then there was a wonderful Indian scholar, Sanskrit, is named Shrikant Bahulkar, and it had all finished, and everyone had applauded, and Bob put his arm around His Holiness, and they were walking off, and I remember thinking, oh, I just want to cry. He's not going to let us give him katas. He's just leaving. And all of a sudden, His Holiness pushed Bob out of the way and he came up and he went like this. Thank you very much, he said. And that was another time. And I thought, wow, it's amazing what one little thing, the Dalai Lama sees everything. And I remember thinking, wow, I wish I could be like that. I remember thinking that. I hope that I can always remember the little guy.
Mm, wonderful. Wow, that put a big smile on my face. Thanks for sharing that. More recently, you've been a very active member here with the Lama Yeshe Ling community. We're very grateful for that. You led the community through some white tar practices last year at the New Year's retreat, and we'll be leading some medicine Buddha practices this year at the forthcoming retreat. I was curious if you could speak a bit about how you became involved with our center and how that's impacted your life.
Oh, it's totally changed my life. It's fabulous. My teacher, Chunlarato Rinpoche, passed away in 2022. And he'd been my teacher for 21 years. So I really, really missed him. And I thought I just have to live up to what he believed I could do. So that's my step now. I don't know if I'll find a teacher. And then in 2023, His Holiness gave the Chakra Samvara initiation. And I thought, oh, I want to practice this. This is so incredible. I would dedicate this practice to Chungla Rinpoche, but how am I going to practice? And then I saw this little ad of Lama Yeshe Ling, Geshe Sonam Nuda, was going to teach Chakra Samvara um, sadhana explanations or something. And I thought, I've got to go there. And that's how I got there. And the moment I came, I felt so comfortable. I mean, everyone here is so kind and open, and it's not competitive the way some Dharma centers are. It just felt really comfortable and happy to be here. And I thought could not have picked a better place because Geshe Sonam is an amazing teacher. And my notebooks are just filled with all of the incredible vast amounts of information he can give you about anything. I remember the Tara in practice that we did. I had the little booklet printed out, and everything was covered with my handwriting all around it for the afternoon session because there was so much to put into there. And then Kedrup being the translator also is just amazing. It's such a gift to have two people get along so well when they're working together, that we are joyful all the time when we're listening, that you don't sense tension. And I think that's very, very rare to have a situation like that where you just feel everybody really loves each other. It's rare. So I'm happy, very happy to be here for that reason.
I echo all of your sentiments. Yeah, we are very lucky.
Yeah.
So we're going to get to a reading from the book shortly, but before we do, let's set the stage because there's a bit of a time gap and culture gap that some folks may not be familiar with. So before we dive in, is there anything you'd like to let us know about that period of time?
Yeah, I was looking this up because I realized that a lot of people don't know that there were 14 Dalai Lamas and they all had their separate uniqueness. And what was interesting about the sixth was he was born in 1683 and passed away in 1705. So it was 23 years only. He was born in a sort of far regional area of Tibet in Tawang. And he um, I think what's really interesting is at that time, Mongolia, China, and India had a really strong influence on each other. And the Tibetans also were independent nation. And so that's also very different from how things are now. Um, I think that we talked about the other things in that the sixth Dalai Lama never wrote Dharma texts. He only wrote poetry. And then he spent very little time as a monk, maybe 2 years, and then he became a lay person. And he actually went to bars and he drank and he met people and he was known also as the turquoise bee. He got rid of all of his monastic clothing and only wore turquoise silk clothing and was obviously, and jewelry, had long hair. So he was quite unique in that way. And and I think, a lot of people, I feel like a lot of people misunderstand him and think, oh, well, he was dissolute. He was uh, uh, just not serious about things. But I felt like the more I read about him, the more I agreed with His Holiness is that he must have had another plan. And His Holiness proposes that maybe the sixth Dalai Lama wanted to have once again, because there was the reincarnation system had started with the Karmapas, and then the Dalai Lamas took it on, and so they were being identified uh, through characteristics that the previous one left behind. But His Holiness the Dalai Lama, current one, thinks that it may have been that the sixth Dalai Lama wanted to change that and make it more an inherited lineage again, like the Sakyas have. You have a kid who becomes the Dalai Lama, because perhaps from what I was reading about his time, he might have felt that it was very corrupt, that you could reincarnations could be bought. If a rich family could give you a lot of money, then maybe some official will say, "Oh yeah, we'll recognize him," rather than. So I think that was one of the big things.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that setup. Do you want to take us through a reading?
Yes. Well, first of all, as far as history goes, I was going to read a little teeny bit of something that Bob said since he's not here. He talks a little bit about um, the history of Tibet at that time, and you get an idea of what an effusive person Robert Thurman is. For a while, when I was editing his work, I had to say, Bob, could you not put an exclamation point after every sentence you write? So I'm just going to read you a little bit about what he said about the sixth Dalai Lama and Tibet at that time. Um, Although it can be said that the sixth Dalai Lama was somewhat ahead of his time, we did learn to see him as leading Tibet and the world around it on its way toward modernity and postmodern golden age of peace, prosperity, and universal enlightened lifestyle that he and his line of compassionate incarnations foresee for us all eventually, widely known mystically in Tibet and around the world as the Age of Shambhala. He did this remarkable job doing so in very turbulent times when a global imperialist lifestyle was militarily scrunching disparate nations together into empires during the entire stages of a process of planetary industrializing and colonializing. So this is Bob's view of what was happening at that time when Mongolia and China and everyone was involved.
The exclamation marks ring out.
Yes. It's quite funny. I mean, it's he writes like that, although his academic writing is very, very academic. But if you read some of his more casual writing, he's there like e- exclamation points everywhere. And I think he did a translation of the Tibetan book of liberation through hearing, the Tibetan Book of Dead, and he starts each announcement instead of "oh" with "hey!" exclamation point. So, so in some ways, it was kind of funny to write with him because he couldn't be more different. Um, I would like to read to you the beginning, the very first page of the story. So gets a setting of what's going on. And then I'd also like to read to you some dialogue because so that you can have an example of what it was like when I fictionalized some person. So this is the opening page. Dying into the between. Resounding from realms beyond, my ebbing life searches for a return. Deep voices call me. Carry on. A vein in the fifth Dalai Lama's neck pulsed. Visions from his life spread before him. Beat. Buddhas and bodhisattvas hovered near, some as luminous and glowing as tiny atoms, others growing huge and diaphanous. His awareness expanded beyond physicality, far beyond the cocoon of a lama's maroon and yellow robes. Beat. Voices intoned him. Beat. His heart reeled him back into his body, a quivering ripple. Faint throb. His trusted circle of men leaned in, illusions in a fading reality. A hologram of a swan in a pool circled his body. She lifted her curved neck, her beak streaming milk into 1,000 hands fanned open, reaching out from the Dalai Lama's expanded form, a vision not seen by ordinary beings. Galloping hooves vibrated through him. His godmother, Sri Devi, glorious goddess, charged in on her flying mule. Would she lift him up and take him back to duty on earth one more time? Forward, she thundered. He waited for a sign from his protectress. Closer, now closer, she brandished her club as though ready to attack him. He ducked, awaiting the blow. She rode past. Gold dust kicked up from mule hooves. Tiny worlds flickered within each particle. Atom-sized beings began falling into space, calling him for help. He instinctively reached forward. No, no, it shouldn't be like this. So that's the opening of the fifth Dalai Lama passing away and deciding to reincarnate, but not sure.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you. And do you understand you have a poem prepared as well that you'd like to share?
Um, I actually had another scene prepared that is that gives you how I wrote the character of the that I thought might be interesting for you, so you could feel a little bit of the development of the young Dalai Lama.
Yes, please.
So, let's see. So, I think I might have marked the wrong thing. I'll read you this one instead. So this is with a fictional person. Sorry. Okay. mismarked my markers.
No problem. Take your time.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries. I'll take a moment to
Yeah.
let everyone know about our upcoming Medicine Buddha retreat. If you haven't seen that advertised yet, go over on our website and check that out. I believe it's December 27th, 28th, 29th, and we'll have a number of guest teachers, Annie included, along with Paula, Churchester, and Geshe Sonam, who will be doing some guided meditations with Medicine Buddha. So look forward to folks joining us for that if you're available. I'll take another moment to plug my Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning practices at 6 a.m. if anybody would like to join us, early risers, anyone looking to start new routines in the new year, welcome to join us there as well. We're doing 21 taras and Lama Zopa Rinpoche's very kind methods to transform suffering into happiness, which I can personally vouch for a wonderful way to start your day.
Okay. I definitely marked it incorrectly.
No worries, Anna. We can pivot.
Okay.
Is there, go ahead.
Oh, I could read one of the poems that I wrote, and then whenever he was thinking to himself, this Dalai Lama I would write everything in italics, and so you would get a sense of what it was like for him to think about things. And I think I need your help again, Ryan, and say something else. For some reason, I've marked all the wrong places.
No worries at all.
I think I might need to use the table of contents of all things. Oh, and I just this is a scene that is fictional, but it gives you an idea of what he was like as a person. And in the book, we just call him Changyang instead of Changyang Gyatso or His Holiness. Changyang finished his most pressing audiences by late afternoon. His head throbbed. He rose abruptly from the snow lion throne, causing all the attendants to scatter. Though reluctant to stop him, Punsuk Wangpo, his chamberlain, felt obligated. Your Holiness, I'm so sorry, but there's one more person to see you. Who's this last person? A woman. She's most insistent. I told her to go away, but she refuses. She's not on the list and she might cause a commotion. I defer to you and how you'd like to handle this. I'd already had Ugyen remove her from the premises, but she shouted. She says she's the wife of some cousin to a groom of yours, Tempa. Just then, Chang'an could hear a woman weeping and pounding the door. Since Chang'an had already risen, he walked toward the door himself. I'll invite her in. But before he could do so, the door flew open. He saw the woman slap Ugyen, his guard, and spit on him. Ugyen was about to scold her when he saw Kundan. Oh, your holiness, Ugyen bowed, falling to his hands and knees, touching the ground. The woman, in the midst of a stream of litanies, turned and saw Kundan before her. She ran to clasping Changyan's feet, touching her head on them. Your holiness, Kundan, please help me. Changyan helped her up. Her apron was threadbare and soiled, her hands strong from doing manual labor. Kundan placed the falling strands of her hair behind her ears. What happened? Please, come in, sit down. Changyang took her hand. Wangpulak, Please bring us some tea. She wiped her face on her sleeve, extremely embarrassed. The Dalai Lama still held her hand. She never imagined meeting him in person. He was so handsome. He became even more so because he clearly cared totally about her welfare. Her eyes were soft and shone. Standing in his presence, she seemed bathed in his light. She immediately relaxed. Your Holiness, I'm the wife of Tempa's cousins. I would never have bothered you, but I thought since Tempa always speaks so highly of you that you might help me. She wrung her hands. My husband's missing. His name is Tashi. Something has happened. He's usually a good-for-nothing, but he always comes home at night. He hasn't been here for 3 days now. We fought. Will you tell me your name, wife of Tempa's cousin? Changyang touched her hand again. Kelsang. Do you mind my asking what you fought about? She began to weep, a mixture of anger and regret. We fought about a stupid thing. He gave me a ruby. I don't know where he stole it, but I know it was stolen. I said he must be an honest man and make an honest livelihood and not continue being a thief. And he told me he was fed up with me and I'd be sorry if I talked to him that way. And then he stormed out and I haven't seen him since. Changyang could tell she wasn't giving him the whole story. He now grasped Tenpa's behavior when he returned to Lhasa were linked. Have you mentioned this to Tempa yet? He insisted I not bother you. I'm sorry to take your time, Your Holiness. Changyang turned to Phuntsuk Wangpo. Please bring Tempa here. Changyang saw how only one part of her hair was streaked white, the rest was still black. Her cheeks were weathered and ruddy from the sun. She had bruises on her arm and cut on her brow, where a scab had recently formed. He pointed to her bruises. I'm glad you came. What happened? Phuntsuk Wangpo bought tea, reluctant to serve the woman. Changyang took the tea, serving her himself. She was overwhelmed when he insisted on putting the tea into her hand. She drank his blessings, speaking between tears and catching her breath. He's been up to no good. Whatever he was up to was also no good for you. She reached into the folds of her chuba, placing her hand under her breast. Opening her hand, she showed Changyang the ruby. I can't take this. Anyone seeing it would think I'd stolen it. I'm not asking you to find him, but I miss Tashi. He wasn't all bad, just so stupid. He gets himself in trouble all the time. I never knew I could miss him. Your Holiness, please forgive him if he's harmed you. How did you get the cuts and bruises, Kelsang La? Kelsang put her hand over her brow. Nothing. I'm sure it's something. Her face contorted between anger and despair. She started slowly and then spoke as if she couldn't speak fast enough. Some men came looking for him. Big men, they spoke Tibetan, but strangely, they were dressed like merchants. I didn't think they were. They shouted, "Where's Tashi?" I said I didn't know where he was. I told them to take the money. I told them to take it out of the small bag and handed it to them. I told them they could take everything, but just to leave me alone. They did some things to me. I fought, but then they killed my dog because he's barking too loud and I hurt his neck. And then they laughed. And then they saw the ruby and they looked very upset and left. They didn't take it. One of them grabbed me by the neck and said, I mustn't say anything to anyone. I'm not easily scared, even though they took me. I will have my revenge. As they were leaving, I heard Tempa's name. I was worried the two of them got messed up in something. Tempa got angry with me. He said that he wouldn't have anything to do with those people who came to offend His Holiness. I would never try to offend you, Your Holiness. I'm sorry what Tashi may have done to you. I'm sorry. I made so much trouble outside, but no one would listen to me. And that's the excerpt.
Wow. Thank you very much, Annie. I'd like to open up the for questions now. If anybody would like to ask any questions about the book or anything at all, please feel free to raise your hand. Go ahead, or type it into chat. Dave can let us know if we have anything in the chat.
Sure. This isn't so much a question, but the opening that, they're trying to imagine what such a I realized being what the death meditation I realized being would entail. This just moves me so much.
Oh,
So
thank
I
you.
just yeah, this is yeah, because it, you know, we um it's interesting to imagine what that might be like for ourselves, and it won't be quite like that, but you know, so it's
Yeah.
like a guide, you know. It's
Oh,
wonderful.
oh, thank you. I've been reading a lot about dissolutions and uh, as part of my regular practice. So when I wrote that scene, I was trying to imagine not only what the Dalai Lama was doing, but what the observers were seeing. So,
Yeah,
thank
I'll echo Dave's sentiments. You know, someone who has a hard time imagining these things, what you wrote really jumped right off the page into my imagination, and it was quite wonderful.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Yeah.
Hi, Natalie. I see you have a question. Go ahead.
Um, Annie, I really enjoyed you reading the excerpts, and I was wondering if there's any thoughts about doing an audiobook.
Well, actually, someone asked Bob, and he wants to do it. And I said, well, if you're going to do an audiobook, since we both did it, maybe we could do it together.
Well, that
Uh,
would be amazing.
yeah, and then he said, oh, yeah, because like you could do the women. And I thought,
Yeah.
well, not just the women. I kind of like Tanya and Gata myself. Yeah. So we'll see what happens with that part. But then, of course, someone said, oh, you need a big star doing all the reading. So, but thank you, Natalie.
I thought your reading was wonderful, and at the time I was like, oh, she could totally narrate this audiobook herself if she wanted to, and it would be lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. It was
It's
very
like
fun. Yes.
it's hard. It's actually hard to do it without slipping up at all.
It is hard. I mean, I did practice reading some of the parts, these scenes on my own, especially when you're nervous, you can really, really get messed up.
Cut.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes when because at Tibet House we're supposed to do our own advertising and then they'll post it. And sometimes I have to say something and it's just my husband's like he's done sound technician stuff things and he said, I'm just gonna leave it running so you'll just repeat it until you don't make a mistake.
Yeah, that works. I find it surprising how many
Yeah.
takes it takes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing, Annie. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you like to take us through a dedication to close us out?
Yes, yes. I was thinking actually for the dedication, I would read one of his poems, one of the six Dalai Lama's poems, because he wrote some really beautiful ones. And this one in particular, I really liked. In this short lifetime, we have done just so much. Let us see if we may meet again as children in our next life. And then I'd like to do the little line from Shantideva. Chisi namka neba dang, doa chisi negurba, desi dani negurne, doe dungel sawar shuk. As long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, so may we too remain and dispel the miseries of the world. Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Annie. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Annie.
It was a delight.
Thank
It
you.
was lovely to hear you to read, Annie. I was engrossing. I just wanted you to keep going.
Yeah, no, like this lady character. Now she's in my head.
Thank you,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Dorothy.
Yeah, it just enriches the Buddha Dharma so beautifully to add stuff like this. I love it.
Oh, thank you. I was thinking it might be fun sometime to do like a chapter to
Yeah,
Oh,
read a chapter
do
in
it.
a group and have comments about what's happening.
Mm,
Yep.
hmm
That's a
I'll
lovely idea.
I'll second Natalie's
Oh,
video. Please just do it that way. Just with the brain injury, I can't read that well, so
that's,
I would really love it.
oh, that's nice. Because I would really like to do it. And I was thinking when this book was being written, Bob had so many ideas, and I said to him, do we really want to have all of these? And it's getting really long." He said, "Yeah, we're going to have the whole thing," because he's, academic mentality. So he thinks 800, 900 pages is nothing. And I said, 900 pages is a lot to read if you're like a regular fiction reader. And he said, no, it'll be fine. So I thought, okay, so this is what I'm going to do. My plan is to write chapters that are 3 to 5 pages long. And that way you will get through them without thinking, oh my God, we're still on chapter 1. I can do another. It's short. I'll try it, and then maybe it won't be so arduous to get through the book.
I haven't got to that part of the book, but I want to. Now I need to go find out what happens to what was
The
her
regent.
to Kelsang?
Oh,
What
to
happens to?
Kelsang. Oh, yes. Yes, there's a twist in it.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a twist.
Okay, now I have to finish the book.
That's nice. I'm so happy that there have been some people who have read the book now, because I was really worried when we had the book signing. Someone came up to me. Actually, it was when Jado Rinpoche came. A man came up to me and he said, "I just wanted to let you know, I read the whole thing in a month. I had the month off, and so I read the whole thing." And it turns out he's a good friend of Bob's, and he said, "And I know you wrote it because it has feelings in it." It's kind of funny. Oh, thank you.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well,
Thank you so much, Annie. Thank you, everybody.
It's been great.
yes.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Take care. See you next time.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Ryan. That was a great interview.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank you,
Ryan.
Ryan. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all your works.
Yeah, it was great.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we're not nervous anymore, Ryan.
Dave, can you stop the streaming now?
Sure.